Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a long time since I've done anything of note as far as any video is concerned. The last time I was around in these parts on YouTube, I was kind of going over Nintendo's E3 Direct. Funnily enough, nearly 3 months later, there's talk of a September Direct going down. But, I mean, if that should be the case, there's always going to be a live reaction from me and my Discord server members and all that sort of stuff until I figure out if I want to kind of continue with the game stuff. And if I am going to continue with it, I might just, it could just be like live streaming Smash Brothers or any of the other games I play, like Minecraft or something like that. Just do like live streaming with my Twitch, maybe use that more. But as far as speculating content is concerned, I think that is going to be strictly saved to the wrestling. If I can, maybe talk about that a little more, because as far as doing stuff on YouTube now, there's only really a few ways to go about it. You either got to talk about something you could talk all day about, and it's something you have a lot of passion for. And with talking about it, it's really fun for you to do it, and you get fun out of it. Or it's just like you're going over the history of something and you're putting a lot of time and effort into it. Like, as far as like just being, I find for me now, the way to use this platform is to talk about things that I find fun and I'm passionate about. And I've never really given, following wrestling, a 100% of my time on here. Like, I still can't. Like, I mean, my university resumes next week. Next Thursday, I'll be doing full-time studies again. So it's still going to be very part-time stuff. But if I'm going to be doing part-time YouTube work, it's clearly not for the views. It's not going to be that way. It's just for whatever I want to talk about and throw out there. And it's for my own personal vanity's sake of having fun doing it. But, once in a while you get somebody who also vibes with you. So this Sunday already is AEW All Out 2021. And it's looking to be the biggest pay-per-view in the company's very short, little over 2-year history. Kind of wild how the summer has went for All Elite Wrestling. A while ago, there was talk of some major signings regarding CM Punk and Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson, of course, most of you watching this or listening to this would know that he was Daniel Bryan in WWE. A man who just finished main eventing night 2 of WrestleMania just back in April, became a free agent in May, and is seemingly locked in or is pretty well near the end of negotiations. Like, he's to many sources, his debut is imminent, and his first appearance for AEW could already be happening as early as this pay-per-view. Apparently the plan is to debut him and have him make his first AEW appearance on this show. As for CM Punk, the other major player involved in this big, huge summer, was said to be close to his negotiations being almost a done deal around the same time that the Bryan Danielson news spoke. And Punk, and then all of a sudden, AEW books the United Center for their second episode of Rampage. It's only going to be their second Rampage episode, which is a show that airs tonight, in fact. It was only their second Rampage, and they rent out this huge venue in Chicago, and it's like, why would they be renting out that building if they didn't have something huge for it? So once that was announced, it was all but confirmed that Punk was going to be debuting there. He did make his triumphant return to wrestling on that second edition of Rampage. It opened up the show, and it was a moment in wrestling. You could see underneath here, I got the Best in the World logo that AEW brought back with his return based on his old WWE shirt, Money in the Bank 2011 days, when Punk was becoming like a top guy in the WWE, and he had his big breakthrough moment with the pipe bomb promo and all that. But even before that, in his days in the Straight Edge Society and the feud with Jeff Hardy in 2009, Punk was one of my favorite wrestlers at the time, and I was a big fan of his once he started really breaking out as a single star, as a heel, doing the Straight Edge Society stuff. I liked him as a babyface, straight edge wrestler before that, but he got to show a lot more of his mic chops as he turned heel. And then eventually he got into this tweener phase. Then he got into just being one of the best mic talkers, whether he was a babyface or a heel. And when he left wrestling in 2014, I thought that was, it'd been years, and there was always, nothing ever came of the talk. He never ever seemed interested. He did some MMA with the UFC for a bit, and I mean, he did so in like his mid-30s, late 30s, which is like a little late to be training to such a disciplined sport. that really takes one's whole life to be training for. You need to take advantage of your physical prime right away to be successful in that sport. So that happened, and then he kind of, when his fights he got mauled in both of them and lost in tremendous fashion, but at least he had heart to go in the cage. But then he was resigned to like a commentator, and then he wasn't doing anything for the UFC, and then he just kind of disappeared from the limelight. But wrestling fans always have chanted his name since 2014. We all kind of, yeah, I didn't think it was ever going to happen. Like, I mean, in wrestling, you should never ever say never, but I thought Punk was going to be one of those stubborn people that stuck to, no, if I go back, my walking away will be a failure and blah blah blah. But as it turns out, he was just walking away from WWE. As far as wrestling is concerned, if there was another viable option back when he left, he might have just taken a year or two off and maybe went to that other said promotion. But there had to be a big company that was worth joining for him to return. And we see with AEW that obviously, like, there's a new company in town. Like, John Cena has a match with Roman Reigns. It's his first main event in like years on pay-per-view, main event of SummerSlam, and he's going to break Ric Flair's record if he wins. And there just wasn't really a whole lot of talk with SummerSlam. Like, all the news was on CM Punk. He debuted on Rampage the Friday before SummerSlam, and all any wrestling fans could talk about was like, well, Punk is back and he's with AEW. And now, seemingly with Bryan Danielson on the way, there's a lot of stuff for All Elite going forward, and it begins with this pay-per-view here tonight. Former biggest star of NXT, Adam Cole, is a free agent now. He's seemingly going to be heading to AEW shortly as well. Who knows? I mean, his girlfriend is there. All of his friends are working for the promotion. It benefits his style. That super indie PWG style is the type of matches they like to do. There's some old school thrown in with it as well, but it is a very modern product. And it's, that they're going to use him as a top guy. If Adam Cole goes there, he's going to be right in the mix along with all the other top guys. And he's going to be shot straight to the top if he goes there. So he opted not to re-sign with WWE, which is the big talk for a lot as well. When, the news of Punk and Danielson getting out, that they were AEW imminent, WWE knew Cole's contract was coming up. So what happened was, in order to work TakeOver 36, where he had his last match against Kyle O'Reilly a few weeks ago, Adam Cole signed an extension to work that TakeOver. And then after that extension, his contract was done. Like, he had no more obligations. So in that time, WWE tried their absolute best to re-sign him. In fact, Vince McMahon and Adam Cole had a sit-down meeting where allegedly he was offered well over $1 million, more than anybody in NXT who could be transitioned to the main roster has ever been offered. And he was guaranteed a spot on SmackDown, which is, the show that's doing marginally better than Raw, is seen as maybe the better show of Raw and SmackDown. And by that, I mean a slim margin. Both main roster television shows have seemingly burnt a lot of people out. They are not given the interest that, say, Dynamite is. And there's a lot of hype going around AEW right now that, like, why would Adam Cole re-sign when he's seen a lot of guys his size just not get used well at all? And he can look over at the other promotion and he's going to know that they're going to use him just fine. So anyway, but again, turning down $1 million is quite a bit of money to be turning down. Like 1.5 million or whatever it was. It was some crazy over $1 million contract that they offered him, and he still chose to decline it, work his last few dates to his extension, work TakeOver 36, and become a free agent afterwards. So if he turned down WWE for all that money, there's only one other place he's going, and that's to join, the whole cast and crew over at All Elite Wrestling. So with Bryan Danielson debuting on this pay-per-view on Sunday, most likely, unless they change their mind and they want to debut him elsewhere, but again, all signs are pointing to him debuting on Sunday, and then Adam Cole to be coming in a month or two, or who knows how long afterward. This company's got a lot of momentum, and you could tell that the landscape has just changed. Like, all the hype for the wrestling fandom has come together for this show, and this is in a time where NXT was hosting their TakeOver event, and again, TakeOver 36 featured a fantastic match between Walter and Ilya Dragunov for the NXT UK title. I'd recommend anybody to go watch it. It might actually be my personal match of the year up to this point. I thought it was fantastic. A perfect match if there ever was one. That was fantastic on SummerSlam weekend. I didn't think anything on SummerSlam was particularly, bat home. It was just a really long, dull pay-per-view. Didn't really have a whole lot of hype. I mean, both of those shows came off the heels of CM Punk debuting for AEW, so, I mean, what could really be done? But, like, Walter and Dragunov, I thought really had a hell of a contest, and that's probably going to be the last takeover done by, like, Triple H and Shawn Michaels in that format that they've been doing. The super indie format in the last few years, and it seems that Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard are going to be taking NXT over, and those style takeovers could be a thing of the past. That style of super indie working in the NXT barometer could be completely abolished. NXT is probably going to be changed drastically and be more like Raw very soon. So that NXT we know and loved is officially dead now. So for me, looks like the takeover reviews are definitely a thing of the past. And as for WWE, it's just like I'm kind of burnt out on them. But AEW has reemerged this excitement as far as the wrestling fandom is concerned. Like, I have pretty big expectations for this pay-per-view. A lot of fans do. It's got all the hype in the world. This is the summer show. Even though it's happening at the beginning of September, it took all of July and August to build to this point. It's had over 2 months worth of hype. It's got all the wrestling fandom's eyes on it. My brother, who kind of tuned out from WWE and got kind of disenfranchised by some of their decisions, he's a casual fan. He's not a diehard like me, but he knows enough to kind of follow wrestling and watch it and enjoy it. And he's been watching Dynamite and Rampage weekly since the last couple weeks. Once he heard Punk started, he started paying attention to the show, taking a look at the young talent, taking a look at some of the veterans, seeing that what is going on is a very exciting product right now. And I think there's a lot of maybe some lapsed fans, or at least burnt out WWE fans, who are feeling the exact same way as my brother, where it's like they say, oh, well, there's a new show, they tune into it, maybe they see a couple things they like and they tune in again, and then all of a sudden you might have them hooked. I mean, AEW is breaking over 1 million viewers more often than not every Wednesday night, getting over 1 million viewers per show, and they've been such a success on TNT that TBS is acquiring both Dynamite and Rampage in the new year, so they got an even better TV deal coming up. So, and with this pay-per-view, I mean, with all the talk that I've heard going into it, and with what Tony Khan said in his Q&A just the other day, he believes that this is probably going to be the largest buy rate for a pay-per-view that the company has ever done. So if you are expecting to get the most money out of this particular pay-per-view, it's got to be seen as your most successful show of all time. So with all that being said, I had to get all the exciting stuff out of the summer of what's led into the show being as big of a deal as it is. As of right now, they're doing a fan fest in Chicago before the pay-per-view, before Rampage tonight. A pretty big deal. I've seen some people tweet their photos and stuff from all that, going into the show. So that's a big deal. It's been like a huge week for AEW. They had Dynamite there on Wednesday. They've got this couple night fan fest. They got fan fest and Rampage today. Another fan fest tomorrow, and then the pay-per-view on Sunday. So pretty big stuff. Like this is big. Like there's a new kid in town. There's a new shop in town, and WWE isn't the place to go anymore for anybody who gets big on the independents. In fact, most of the big independent guys are going to look at this, see that a bunch of independent guys and a couple upper mid card WWE wrestlers who weren't used properly, that went to the independents and became big independents, made this, and just figure that this is the modern product with a modern promoter, modern bookers. I think this is where we have to go to succeed. And it really is changing a lot of things. Like, I mean, it's never been a more exciting time for the industry. Before I go on and predict and this is actually going to lead very good into the opener and all that. But there's never been a time where a lot of companies have kind of banded together and made a bunch of alliances. Since I've been a fan, where AEW has opened its doors to Impact, it's opened its doors to AAA, New Japan and them have opened the doors to each other. So AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling are working together. A lot of companies are working together and using each other to promote each other's stars to make the industry better. So that if AEW wants somebody from AAA or New Japan, they're gonna do that. And should any of those promotions want somebody from AEW is gonna do that, because it's better. It's kind of bringing back the territorial days where promoters would use each other's stars and help the industry grow. And it's like all these companies are working together to make wrestling a better place, except for WWE. It's like everything is exciting in wrestling right now, except for what's going on in WWE. Everything is kind of booming right now. Well, I guess WWE's business is doing all right. They're always going to be doing financially good. They've got guaranteed big time television money. But as far as like hype and feeling like the health of the industry and all that, it's like it's all these promotions, and then also WWE, who's just kind of by themselves in their own little thing that they got going on. But anyway, I will kind of touch upon more of this, AEW working with multiple promotions things once we get to the opener. Interesting enough with this pay-per-view, and we'll get down to the pay-per-view talk now that I've spent a decent amount of time talking about the exciting summer that's led up to the show. The buy-in match had to be switched. So originally, the Women's Casino Battle Royale, which is now on the main card, was scheduled for the buy-in or the pre-show. But unfortunately this week, Pac versus Andrade El Idolo, Andrade, was canceled because Pac is either A, suffering from some travel issues. He's not allowed to travel to where they're having the show, is what was released, but some people think he might have been around somebody with COVID. Either in any which way, Pac is compromised and will not be wrestling on Sunday, so the match got scrapped. So what happened was they promoted the Women's Battle Royal to the main show, and they just kind of slapped together a new pre-show match. So the buy-in match this Sunday is now going to be Best Friends, which is Orange Cassidy, Chuck Taylor, and Wheeler Yuta, along with Jurassic Express, Luchasaurus, and Jungle Boy, against the Hardy Family Office, which is Matt Hardy, a Private Party, the team of Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn, and TH2, which is the team of Angelico and Jack Evans. It's a standard 10-man tag match. I know they like to do like 6-mans or trios matches on Dynamite a lot, but just like any other multi-man tag match you would expect on like Dynamite, really. I mean, it's just a another match. I don't expect it to be anything super crazy, but there's some pretty talented guys in there. I like Private Party. Matt's a great veteran. Jurassic Express has a lot of momentum, considering that they took the Young Bucks to the limit for the tag titles just about a month ago, and went far in the Tag Eliminator Tournament, only to come up short to Jurassic Express. Orange Cassidy is always a superstar. He's got the charisma, and he's connected with the audience in such a way that no matter what he does, it gets a great reaction. So yeah, I mean, it'll probably be a pretty good match. It's just, but it's an interesting one to predict. Like, I imagine maybe the baby faces will win, but maybe the heels will. I guess if I had to do a guess, I'm just gonna go with the baby faces winning, because you got both Jungle Boy and Orange Cassidy, who are two guys that I think AEW values quite a bit in there, and they might want to give them a big W before the pay-per-view starts. So I'll go with Best Friends and Jurassic Express winning this buy-in match, but who knows? They could give it to the heels, but my prediction goes to the good guys. Now we can go to what I believe will open the show on Sunday, and that is Jon Moxley versus New Japan Pro Wrestling's resident veteran, Satoshi Kojima. Now, what's interesting about this match was, for the weeks leading up to it, before any word was made, like, Moxley didn't have a pay-per-view match booked for the show for the longest time. What was going on was, it seems like Mox likes to wrestle the New Japan guys. They've given him a few veterans to defend the IWGP United States Championship against. He's wrestled a couple of them, and they've always been hard hitting banger contests, and he's at least wrestled 2 other New Japan guys before this, so it seems to be the thing. So it seems like Moxley and AEW's idea was for him to wrestle Hiroshi Tanahashi, who, for, again, anybody who's listening to this or watching this will know who he is. He's the veteran of New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's the ace of New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's the top guy who basically saved the company and had killer matches for years and owned the 2010s with best match performances against Kazuchika Okada, Minoru Suzuki, so many others. So that was what they wanted to get done. And it seems like AEW and AEW was pushing for it, but for whatever reason, Tanahashi and New Japan Pro Wrestling shut it down. I don't know if it's because they don't want Tanahashi wrestling in the States. They don't want him to get compromised. I've heard Japan itself is really bad, so maybe the area Tanahashi is in is super COVID infected, and he's isolating, and they could only really afford to send somebody else. But anyway, due to whatever, the negotiations for Tanahashi fell through. It will not be Tanahashi, and instead they announced that Jon Moxley will face Satoshi Kojima instead on the pay-per-view. And I still think it's going to be a great match. I think it's going to be a hard-hitting, stiff affair, a good brawl. Guys throwing stiff clotheslines. Big hard shots. It's gonna be the mean man opener, like the mean man opener, like just the hard-hitting, stiff contest to kind of get the crowd going with every hard shot and all that. This is Moxie coming out to Wild Thing. These guys beating the piss out of each other for about 20 minutes. We'll get the fans going and all that sort of stuff. This would be to me the ideal thing to open the show, and I think that they will open the show with this. I'm quite confident with that, but in the end, I believe that it is going to be a Moxley win. Like any other time he's wrestled a New Japan Pro Wrestling veteran, they have a hard-hitting, stiff affair that's great and gets the fans going crazy, only for the New Japan guy to take the old paradigm shift and take the L to the AEW superstar. And I see that happening in this contest here. So Jon Moxley to defeat Satoshi Kojima in a great opener at All Out. Afterward, I would imagine that they're probably going to do the women's casino battle royale. So there's 21 women confirmed for this thing. I just got to look them up now. Not all of them are shown by this graphic, or maybe they are. I think actually maybe they all are being shown on here. I just gotta look through it. So there's this 21 woman battle royal, and the winner will become the new number one contender to the AEW Women's World Championship. So we have Nyla Rose, Thunder Rosa, Anna Jay, the Bunny, Emi Sakura. We have Hikaru Shida, Jade Cargill, Red Velvet, Ty Conti. Got Penelope Ford, Layla Hirsch, Abaddon, Julia Hart, Jamie Hayter, Rebel, Kylan King, and Diamante. And those are all the women that are going to be competing in this battle royal, plus one mystery vacancy. So there's one mystery woman going into it. So they have the 20 women announced, which I just went through here, and there's going to be one mystery entrant, which again, all signs are kind of pointing to the former Ruby Riott from WWE. That's my best guess as to who. I mean, that's somebody whose contract was up ages ago. They got released a long time ago, and AEW would be the ideal place for Ruby to go. I forget her independent name. I think Heidi Lovelace was her name on the independents before signing with WWE. So it'd be a good time for Heidi to go to AEW and kind of become a top veteran there. I mean, they need more veteran hands. Like their women's division has gotten better in the last 2 years. It was a really kind of rough patch for them, and I'd say their first year and a half. But in the last year and a half, it's slowly gotten better. This is a tough one to pick because there's a couple people who could really benefit from the W and to get a shot at Britt Baker in the future. I am going to confidently predict Thunder Rosa to win this so that they can finally run back a Britt versus Rosa match. They had that absolutely classic unsanctioned match, the Lights Out match back in March, and to this day it's still my personal AEW match of the year. Again, I think I liked Walter versus Dragunov more. I think that is my overall match of the year, including all promotions, but for AEW in particular, Britt versus Rosa, Lights Out is still my favorite AEW match of the year so far. So I think it's time we run that back and give Thunder Rosa a big win. She becomes the new number one contender, and then you can build up to her and Britt at some point after this pay-per-view. But I say her. But again, also Ty Conti, I think, is a real dark horse. I mean, she's kind of like the fallback pick, but even then, a fallback pick isn't your full-on pick. But again, that's the person who's like, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave Ty the win here and gave her a future shot against Britt as well. She's kind of been on a roll lately, getting a few big wins. But I still think they want to run back Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa again for the women's title. And the best way to do that would be to have Thunder Rosa run the gauntlet and win this Casino Battle Royale to stamp her name for the next title shot. So I predict Thunder Rosa to win the women's Casino Battle Royale on Sunday. And we got Paul White versus QT Marshall. So the Factory, which is QT Marshall, Aaron Solo, and Nick Comoroto. Anthony Ogogo was a part of this group, but he hasn't been seen, I think, since the Cody match at Double or Nothing. He just kind of vanished after Double or Nothing from the Factory, and it's just been these three for a while. And they've had some run-ins with Paul White, and they've made fun of his hip replacement and all that sort of stuff. And then Paul White said, "Oh, I got a match with you, cutie, at the pay-per-view," and so now they're gonna have a match at the pay-per-view. And then this week on Dynamite, Paul came out to take out the Factory, and he was doing a good job. He was getting beat down by all of them. Then Gun Club came out to make the save, only for Billy Gunn to turn heel and hit Paul with the chair. And then the Factory kind of laid waste to Paul White after that. So I mean, they had the leg up on the go home show. But this is probably not going to go long. Like, I mean, you got to keep it special for when Paul White competes. And, it's a big, giant, over 7-foot man in the ring. And I imagine QT is going to take a few power moves, and he's going to get beat within probably 5 minutes. I don't see this thing going particularly long. You got to keep Paul White as a spectacle, and you can have him squash QT Marshall and have QT make every move that he does look good before giving him the win. But, I mean, I thought this was how it's going to go even before the Factory had the leg up on the go-home show. But especially since they stood tall and with help from Billy Gunn beat him down, I believe Paul White's winning this match. Not only is he going to win this match, but I think he's going to win quick. I don't see this thing going particularly long. So Paul White to defeat QT Marshall on Sunday. Then we have the final fight. It's MJF versus Chris Jericho. And if Jericho loses, he has to retire. That's the stipulation. And we know AEW is serious about the stipulations. Cody Rhodes lost to Chris Jericho nearly 2 years ago for the world title and said if he lost, he'd never challenge for the world title again. And we're going on almost 2 years after that match has happened, and Cody Rhodes has not had one single AEW World Championship match since then. So they are sticking to that stipulation hard. So I imagine if Jericho does lose, he would actually be done as a wrestler, and he would say it's time to retire. I don't think he's retiring here. I really don't. I mean, MJF has won has quite a big leg up in this feud. I would be shocked to see a complete clean sweep and Jericho to just retire like that. I mean, what a good way to go out on pay-per-view, and to lose to a guy 4 straight times like that is a pretty big deal. And, you can have that guy say that he's the one who ended your career and all that. Because MJF got the fluke win at Full Gear. The stipulation back then, all those months, like nearly a year ago now, was that if MJF won, he'd become a member of the Inner Circle if he could beat Chris Jericho. And he did, and then that's what led to him being a member of the Inner Circle for a while, and it caused tensions between himself and Sammy Guevara and even the other original members of the Inner Circle. This led to them finding out that MJF was secretly trying to take it over from within. And when MJF figured out that they were onto him, he secretly formed his own faction in the Pinnacle to wage warfare with the Inner Circle. Because, of course, MJF enlisted the help of, he obviously had Wardlow already, his heavy, his big enforcer. They had Wardlow, but then he also inquired the help of Tully Blanchard's clients, Sean Spears and FTR, which is, again, the former Revival, the team of Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler. This big faction warfare group led to Blood and Guts, where MJF threatened to throw Jericho off the top of the cage, which forced Sammy to quit to keep Jericho safe. But, of course, the dastardly MJF threw Jericho off the cage anyway, injuring his arm and nearly costing Jericho his life, as Chris always brings up. "You nearly tried to kill me, Max. I'll never forget that," says Chris Jericho. So after that, so that means MJF is up 2-0 on Jericho. Eventually, they end up having the big stadium stampede match at Double or Nothing. The Inner Circle wins to stay together. And then each feud kind of breaks off. Like, FTR and Santana and Ortiz are doing a straight tag team feud as a tag team. Sammy Guevara continued to feud with Shawn Spears, individually, the two of them, until Sammy ended up winning that feud. Wardlow he's been seen here and there, but he's basically just been back to MJF's heavy. Jake Hager's completely disappeared. I've not seen him for the longest time. I don't really know what happened with him. And then Jericho and MJF were still continue to be at each other's throats. So a while after Double or Nothing, the beginning of the summer, MJF decides that if Jericho is to have another match with him, he has to go through 5 labors of Jericho. So the first one was he just had to defeat fellow Pinnacle member Shawn Spears. Was the first trial, was the first chapter in the first labor of the labors of Jericho. Jericho was able to defeat Shawn Spears. The second labor for Jericho was to face Nick Gage in a death match, and it was one of the most bloody, like, crazy spectacles you will ever see. It pushed every boundary you could possibly think of. They used a box cutter during the picture-in-picture when a fucking pizza ad was going on and caused Domino's to fucking flip their shit. Jericho somehow was able to defeat the Deathmatch God in a death match for the second labor. The third labor was Jericho faced Juventud Guerrera, and he had to win with a top rope move. So it wasn't just enough to beat Juvi. He had to beat him with a move off the top rope, which Jericho was able to do with he did a spinning back elbow from the top rope. So like a spinning Judas effect from the top. The fourth labor was Wardlow, which Jericho was able to eventually, with MJF at ringside, of course, and Jericho was in fact able to defeat Wardlow as well. And then we come to the fifth and final labor before this pay-per-view match, which was MJF himself. And MJF and Jericho had a great match. It was back and forth. It was really unpredictable. It told a fantastic story. I was really into it. And but the stipulation going into the match was Jericho could not have his theme music be played, and if he hit the Judas effect, he would automatically lose for using the move. So he could not use his finisher against MJF, the spinning elbow. He could not use the Judas effect in this match. And there came a point where Jericho went to use it, thought about it for a second, hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation near the end, MJF hit Jericho with a Judas effect of his own, placed Jericho in the Salt of the Earth armbar, and Jericho fought and tried to escape, but MJF just kept on the hold, and eventually Jericho was forced to tap out. Put MJF as strong as possible, fucking tapped out clean, put this kid over, just unbelievably huge. And I'm like, where does this go from here? Like, I mean, now it's literally MJF 3, Jericho Zip. Like, where does it go after that? I was just thinking that myself. But then we ended up figuring out where it was going to go. Chris Jericho ends up coming out and saying that he wants one more shot against MJF on pay-per-view at All Out, and that he knows what it'll take to get MJF to agree. He said that he is willing to put his career on the line if MJF gives him one more match at the pay-per-view. So, of course, MJF, being the conceited heel that he is and obsessed with any kind of accomplishment that you can just badge on his, or stick to his name, if you will. He says he could not, being the guy who tapped out Chris Jericho once, that's good and all, but it's not nearly as good as being the man who ended Chris Jericho. And that Chris's offer is very, very appealing, and that he is on at the pay-per-view. So this match is set, the final fight. If Jericho loses, he goes into retirement. So the thing is, I'm going to preface this by saying, Jericho has lost most of the matches in this rivalry. He really has. So for him to go 4 straight against MJF and not win a single one seems a bit crazy to me. But again, I guess that would put Max over just enormously. I thought Jericho tapping out to his Salt of the Earth armbar was it was putting MJF over even like massively enough. Like that was a huge win for Max, in my opinion, to get a clean tap out like that with his submission. Because, most of the time they'll have like the babyface pass out or, something like that. Not a visual like I quit, but it happened here. Jim Ross had an in-ring interview with Jericho this week on the Go Home episode of Dynamite. And both men were really, really emotional. It looked like they were holding back tears. They were selling this. Both men were really selling this as the last time Jericho could cut an in-ring interview before a match, before a big match. And that's casting some doubt in my mind that he could win. Like, again, my prediction is still Chris Jericho is not retiring and he will eventually pull one off on MJF. And my prediction is Jericho will win this match and finally get a W over Max on pay-per-view. But with the way that how emotional him and Jim Ross were on this Go Home show, and Jericho's cutting this amazing promo of how Max doesn't have the gall to finish him. He doesn't have that in his character. It's just nothing he can do will end Chris Jericho, even though he wants it to be. Max just isn't that guy. But just the emotion he put into it, and the hint of doubt that he has that he could beat this guy, and makes you think that this could be his last time cutting a promo before a match. It just has me thinking, oh, what if he does just lose 4 straight to MJF and put him over huge and just go into retirement and do commentary for his last bit of however long his contract is? But I don't think that will happen. There's a bit of doubt in my mind with this prediction, which means maybe they will give MJF 4 straight. But I'm still going to say that my prediction is in this final fight, Chris Jericho will dig down deep, finally find a way to defeat MJF and preserve his career to keep on wrestling in AEW. Next up, we have the TNT Championship match as Miro defends against Eddie Kingston. This is a pretty interesting match. I expect it to be pretty good. Also, the Jericho and MJF match, I should probably preface this in saying, I really, really enjoyed their match in the main event of Dynamite a few weeks ago. I really, really enjoyed that match. I think it was about 2-3 weeks ago now. The one where MJF won via submission. So I expect that match to be great storytelling. I expect pretty big things out of that. And there's going to be a lot more drama to it too, because with every time MJF gets close, people will kind of gasp, thinking they might have just seen the end of Chris Jericho's career. So I expect that match to definitely be great. This match here, I expect to be very good stuff. I expect it to be another mean guy match, just like as I mentioned with Moxley versus Kojima earlier in the podcast. This would be another mean guy match with the TNT title on the line. Interesting match. I guess they want to kind of give Eddie Kingston a singles championship match on pay-per-view. Last time we seen Eddie Kingston on pay-per-view, he teamed with Jon Moxley unsuccessfully to challenge the Young Bucks for the tag team titles. So here we are all these months later on another pay-per-view event, and Eddie is now challenging for the TNT championship, which is the secondary title. I kind of count the TNT championship. It's a title that's made for television. You can just tell with it. It's got the station's name in it, though. I mean, what's funny enough is that the TNT title is going to exist when Dynamite and Rampage move to TBS. But Cody and Tony Khan have both come out and said that it's keeping the name. Like, they're keeping it the TNT Championship, despite the fact that both shows will no longer be on TV, which means the TNT Championship will no longer be defended on TNT, but it'll be defended on TBS. But it's the championship that they book for TV a lot. They book it for episodes of Dynamite a lot. They've been booking it. I think this is the first, they booked it for Rampage already, I think a couple times. It's the television championship. It's the title that is defended on TV the most, I would say. But of course, since it's a sanctioned AEW title, they feel they got to have all their championships defended at the pay-per-view. They got no issue with that at all. They could always give Eddie Kingston the surprise win here in Chicago. I don't find that to be super likely myself personally. I don't see Eddie Kingston as the guy to defeat Miro. So as champion, Miro is 100% undefeated in AEW. He has not lost a match since having his first match at the end of last year. He has stayed undefeated. He's become TNT champion. He was undefeated before winning the title, still undefeated after winning the championship. So really, him losing the title is going to be his first loss. Really, that's what they're building up. When he loses that championship, It's going to be his first loss, and I think it's going to be against somebody that they can elevate big with that win. Again, you could do that with Eddie Kingston. You could elevate him, but Eddie is over through his association with Jon Moxley. He is over because he is a veteran, a longtime veteran of the business who the fans respect and always respect, and he stays over from his promo and talking ability. He's one of the best mic workers they have in AEW. So he doesn't need the TNT Championship to stay relevant and over. He is in a position that's pretty untouchable. Like, he's a guy who can take a loss and move on from it, no problem, I think. And I think that's why he is here. I think he is here to give Miro a pay-per-view worthy challenger, to give him a very good match on pay-per-view, and to be a guy that Miro can beat, and it doesn't do too much harm, and he retains the title on pay-per-view. Eddie moves on, Miro moves on, and then that's it. I just don't see Eddie Kingston as the guy to finally be the one to defeat Miro. I just don't see it. I think long term, and I think it really shows this, because they could have had Jurassic Express win the Tag Team Eliminator Tournament, which was ultimately won by the Lucha Brothers. And I think they had Jurassic Express lose for a reason, because they wanted the Tag Team Eliminator winners to be the ones to go on to challenge the Bucks at the pay-per-view and be the ones to defeat the Bucks and, hold the tag titles for a while. So they needed a team that they seen as a long-term team that can, hold the belts, whatever. So with Jungle Boy, I think they really see him as a single star. Like, yes, he teams with Luchasaurus as a tag team, but I think they see him as a young upstart babyface single star long-term. And I think after this pay-per-view, you will start to see him get in positions where he's going to start getting some singles wins and kind of climb up the rankings in the top 5 for AEW more. And he's going to get on a win streak to the point where he's going to get noticed by Miro, who will win in this show and move on as TNT champion. And eventually, maybe he could do it at Full Gear. The next pay-per-view, there will be a TNT championship match as Miro defends against Jungle Boy. And in that match, much like what they did with Darby Allin the year prior with Cody Rhodes versus Darby for the TNT title, you can have Jungle Boy defeat Miro, be the first man ever in AEW to beat him, and simultaneously become the new TNT champion. And he gets a run with the secondary title to show what he can do with the television title that gets defended a lot, and winning his first singles championship like they did with Darby Allin. Do the same thing with Jungle Boy and have the TNT championship and the big win over Miro be the thing that elevates him. Again, I think that might be where they're going. Like, again, I was thinking that for a while, ever since Jungle Boy lost to Kenny Omega back in June. But then when they booked Jurassic Express for that Tag Team Eliminator Tournament, I'm like, oh, well, darn, they're going to have Jurassic Express win this whole thing and then win the rematch with the Young Bucks after just losing to them. But then they got to the finals and they lost to the Lucha Brothers. And the Lucha Brothers are challenging the Young Bucks and not Jurassic Express. So it makes you wonder. So, they didn't want Jungle Boy going for the tag titles. Why is that? I think it's because I think that the company is eyeing him to be their next TNT champion. No disrespect to Eddie Kingston. I'm sure he's going to have a very good match with Miro here at the pay-per-view. But I fully expect Miro to lock in Game Over and retain the TNT championship when all is said and done. So moving from one championship to the next, we have AEW Women's World Champion Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, defending against number 1 ranked AEW women's wrestler Chris Statlander. Chris has come back and has kind of been aligned with best friends. She's been getting a lot of good victories on television. She defeated Nyla Rose. She defeated Penelope Ford. She's defeated a few women since coming back, a few high-profile singles matches to kind of get to the number 1 ranking, and now they have her booked against Britt on pay-per-view. For a while leading into this show, Thunder Rosa was ranked number 1 for the women for what felt like 2 straight months, and I thought they were keeping her there to run it back with Britt on pay-per-view. But then the first episode of Rampage came and went, and Britt defended the title in the main event against Red Velvet successfully. Locked in the lockjaw, made Red Velvet tap out. beat Red Velvet up after the match with Rebel. And then that prompted Chris Statlander to attempt to make the save and fight off Britt and Rebel. But then Jamie Hayter made her re-debut for AEW, aligned herself with Britt and Rebel, and took Chris Statlander out, and the three of them beat down Statlander and Velvet. And then in the next week, Chris Statlander was ranked number 1 for the women. And then when she was ranked number 1 and tried to make the save for Red Velvet, I'm like, okay, so they're going to position Chris Statlander as Britt's opponent for the pay-per-view. And they have, and that's who is challenging Britt. No offense to either of these women. I mean, Britt has really improved a lot. She is becoming a pretty good ring general. She's becoming a solid worker when she's in there with the right person. Chris Statlander is a little green in some areas. I mean, they might surprise me. They might pull off something good. But I fully expect this to be the weakest match of the show, along with the Casino Battle Royale for the women, because, again, there's a lot of really good women in that Battle Royal, but there's also a lot of green as fuck women in that Battle Royal, too. So it's no disrespect to them. They're just on both. It's a couple green women, a couple veteran women on a card filled with a lot of really talented dudes. But I still think the Casino Battle Royale is going to have enough excitement. It's probably going to be laid out in such a way that keeps the excitement going. There's big stakes. Not that there isn't big stakes in the women's title match, but, it's kind of like a Royal Rumble for the women. It's going to have some form of excitement in front of that Chicago crowd. This one here is kind of a little bit predictable. I don't see Britt Baker losing the championship in her first pay-per-view title defense. That's just not going to happen. Chris Statlander has been booked very well since she returned from injury this summer, but she's in a position where being aligned with best friends, and she could just get a few wins against some other women after this loss, that this loss to Britt really isn't going to hurt her, but I don't think she's the one to beat Britt Baker at all. It's much like with Eddie Kingston and Miro. She's the pay-per-view challenger who's going to go in there and do the job for the champion. And that's what I see. I definitely see the good doctor here retaining her title over Chris Statlander, and the AEW Women's World Championship will be retained on this very pay-per-view. Mark my words, ladies and gentlemen. Britt Baker will not be losing the championship in her first title defense. She will defeat Chris Statlander to retain her title. Okay, and moving on, we have the steel cage match for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. The Young Bucks defend against the Lucha Brothers. They're finally running this one back. The two teams with the most chemistry in decades. Whenever the Young Bucks and the Lucha Brothers have a match, magic just seems to happen, especially when they do so on AEW pay-per-view. So the last time these teams fought was for the AAA tag team titles, because as I said, AAA for forever now has always had a working relationship with AEW. It's how Phoenix and Penta work it. They work both. They still work in AAA and they work for AEW. And Kenny Omega, he works for AEW, but he also works for AAA. He's been the AAA Mega Champion for, I think it's going to be going on close to 2 years now. So it's been going on for a while. And whenever these two teams meet, magic just always seems to happen. So for months and months upon months, the Young Bucks have had help from Brandon Cutler, from the Good Brothers, from Don Callis, from Kenny Omega himself. Other members of the Elite have had their back and helped them weasel their way to retain their titles month after month after month. They did so to retain the titles over Jurassic Express a number of weeks ago, and AEW management in kayfabe had enough. They said, you've done this too far, you've pushed our buttons to the limit. The next time you defend those titles, it's going to be inside a steel cage. And your opponents will be the winner of a tag team eliminator tournament. 4 teams. So 4 teams were in it. The first round match took place on the Rampage where CM Punk debuted. They had right after Punk made his debut, actually, they had Jurassic Express, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus defeat Private Party, Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn, to move on to the final round. And then the Wednesday episode of Dynamite after that, we seen the Lucha Brothers, so Phoenix and Penta, defeated the Varsity Blondes, Brian Pillman Jr. and Griff Garrison, to meet Jurassic Express on the following episode of Rampage. On that episode of Rampage, the Lucha Brothers would defeat Jurassic Express to stamp their name to this title match here tonight. And again, I gave my reasoning for why I think they gave Jurassic Express the loss there and did not have them be the ones to challenge the Young Bucks. I think they want a full-on tag team that they see as a team that they're going to push as a team going forward. Again, I think they see Jungle Boy long-term as a single star. I think they see him as a guy to hold the TNT title. So that's why they didn't put him and Luchasaurus in this position to take the titles off the Young Bucks. That's part of it. But also another part of the reason is that Tony Khan knows that these two teams on pay-per-view, when paired against each other, make magic. And this is the first time that they're going to be meeting with the AEW sanctioned tag team titles on the line. Because the last time that they wrestled on AEW pay-per-view, it was for the AAA tag team championships. It was not the AEW World Tag Team titles did not exist the last time the Young Bucks took the Lucha Brothers on pay-per-view, which was at All Out 2 years ago. Again, for the AAA tag team titles. So this is the first time that these two teams are competing for AEW's World Tag Team Championships. It's the first time wrestling on pay-per-view in like fucking over 2 years. They make magic every time, and there's a cage around them. And there's nowhere for the Young Bucks to go. This is their punishment. This is their punishment after months upon months of cheating and weaseling their way to retain the tag titles with the rest of the Elite. This is a way to keep the Elite out. So I believe this is the end of the line for the Young Bucks tag team titles. One of the members of the Elite has to lose on this very night. I don't think we see that with Kenny Omega and his match, but we will talk about that soon enough. I believe that the Young Bucks will be the first members of the Elite to lose their illustrious titles. And it is time. It is time for somebody in the Elite to lose. They're putting a cage up. And on top of that, on the go-home episode of Dynamite 2 nights ago, they had the Young Bucks get a visual pin on Rey Fenix in the 8-man tag team main event. They hit a perfect Meltzer driver on Rey Fenix when all of his partners were scattered and beat up. And Matt Jackson got a visual pin on Rey Fenix on the go-home show. Kenny Omega then came out, and the heels lowered the cage on the Lucha Brothers and Christian Cage. And the Young Bucks and Nakazawa and Cutler and Omega all beat down the Lucha Brothers and Christian inside the steel cage and left them for dead. And so the heels stood super tall with that cage. So now it's time for the babyfaces to come back. And by that, I mean Penta El Zero Miedo and Rey Fenix to beat the holy hell out of the Young Bucks in the cage, put on perhaps the match of the night. I seriously think this is a contender. This is guaranteed to be a great match on the show. They never disappoint when these two teams wrestle. And, the tag titles are on the line. There's a lot of drama. There's a cage. Two of the best teams in the world. Two of the best teams in the world with all the chemistry in the world when they face each other. This could very well be the match of the night. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. It's probably my prediction to be match of the night. Either that or tied with the World Championship match, which we'll speak about very soon. But yeah, I fully believe that the Lucha Brothers, Penta and Phoenix, will eventually defeat the Young Bucks in the steel cage match and become the new AEW World Tag Team Champions. And this will be our designated one and only title change of the pay-per-view. But I very much look forward to this match. It's going to be some fantastic stuff for sure. And now we come to the final little portion of this video. And I am somewhat unsure of this next bit of the match order, because I could feasibly see either one of these two matches main eventing the evening. So we've got CM Punk versus Darby Allin, which is Punk's first wrestling match in nearly 8 years on pay-per-view in front of his hometown of Chicago. That is a huge event, and we know a lot of people are buying this show for this particular match. Like, we know it. 100% we know it. The buy rate's going to be way up for this match right here. So, that's huge. How do you beat that? It's going to get, whether the match ends up being an all-time classic or not, Punk's mere presence in it, and whatever he does throughout the match is going to get the most insane reaction you've ever heard. How do you follow that? I don't think you do. But, maybe they feel that the work of the main event, the work of the World Championship match, might be able to eclipse that of what Punk and Darby Allin do. And there might be an important debut to happen after the match that really ends the pay-per-view on a crazy, crazy note. So, let's go over it, shall we? We'll just go over predicting Punk and Darby Allin first. Again, either one of these two is an interchangeable main event. I could see Punk versus Darby main eventing, or I could see the World Championship main eventing. But again, CM Punk's first match in nearly 8 years on pay-per-view in front of his hometown crowd. It doesn't get any much more perfect than that for, your a fucking match on your show to get a huge reaction. Again, I thought for weeks going into this show that, like, as soon as it was confirmed, like when I heard that Punk was gonna potentially be, or when I heard Punk was pretty much all in and that they were gonna have him debut before All Out so that he could wrestle on the pay-per-view because it's also in Chicago. And then it was pretty obvious he's going to be wrestling Darby Allin because of the few promos that Darby cut beforehand, like talking about, like, AEW is the place to be. Even if you think you're the best in the world, I want to take you on, blah, 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 blah. He called out the best in the world a few times, which is one of CM Punk's most notable monikers, at least during his time with WWE. So we kind of knew that, if the plan was for Punk to work the pay-per-view, he was going to be wrestling Darby Allin. So once it got officially confirmed, I was kind of figuring that it was going to be the main event. I'm like, that it's Punk wrestling in front of his hometown in the first time in forever. Like, I mean, I can't even remember the last time he wrestled in front of a Chicago crowd, because, like, it's his first match in nearly 8 years, but I can't even remember the last time Punk wrestled in front of his hometown audience. It might have been Money in the Bank 2013, where Paul Heyman turned on him. It's been a long time since, it could be over 8 years since he wrestled in front of his hometown crowd. I mean, I can't remember the last time he would have wrestled in front of them, because I don't think that Royal Rumble that he last performed in for WWE before he performs on Sunday, which was his last match, was not in front of Chicago. So I don't remember the last time he did that. So, like, that is just big enough in itself. But again, I could see the reasons for doing the World Championship last as well, and we'll get to that. However, I think this is a pretty good win for CM Punk. I mean, I just don't see them beating Punk in front of his hometown crowd in his return match. You can have him beat Darby in the flukiest of way. You can have him win with a crucifix or a small package, or he catches the newcomer off guard. I do not see CM Punk losing this match at all. Like, I just don't see them beating the hometown legend, making his homecoming, only for him to lose. Like, I just don't see it. I see CM Punk winning this match, but in saying that, I believe Punk and AEW are going to give Darby Allin absolutely fucking everything before they beat him in a fluky way. I believe Darby is going to, he's going to lose, but it's still going to put him over in such a way that he really doesn't lose a whole lot of steam. And I mean, like, losing to some fluke pin to the hometown legend returning isn't really the worst way to lose anyway. Just being in this spot for Darby is huge in itself. You're wrestling the guy who's got the most hype behind him, who's drawing up this pay-per-view buys. This match could potentially still be the main event over the world title match. So if it does, you're also main eventing perhaps you are main eventing AEW's biggest pay-per-view of all time against the big draw that's causing it to be the biggest pay-per-view of all time. So just being in that position for Darby alone is putting him over more than enough. Being in that spot is enough. And again, it's huge for him. And I'm sure losing to CM Punk in a match of such magnitude, even just to be in there and being in this position to do it, must mean the world to Darby Allin. But I predict that CM Punk will win. Right? So I that's my final prediction there. And then we go to the AEW World Championship match. Kenny Omega defends against the number 1 ranked wrestler in all of AEW, the undefeated Christian Cage. So much like Miro, going into this pay-per-view, Christian is undefeated in AEW until we hit this match. So again, this could potentially be the main event as well. Again, there's good reasons given for why Punk versus Darby could be the main event, and I'm going to give good reasons for why this could potentially be the main event. It's either one or the other. If this isn't the main event, it's the penultimate match, and vice versa. If the Punk and Darby match isn't the main event, then it's the penultimate match, right? They're an interchangeable second and last. It's whatever order the company decides to go with on the night of. So here, I think this is going to be a banger match. We've seen kind of an idea of what these two could do together on the debut episode of Rampage, where they had the Impact World title on the line. They had Kenny defend against Christian Cage on the first episode of Rampage. In the first ever match of Rampage, it was the opener of the first ever edition of AEW Rampage. And they had the Elite try to interfere on Kenny's behalf. It backfired. And, the Young Bucks ended up sliding Kenny a chair. Christian kind of outsmarted him and took him out with the chair himself. And so basically, the Young Bucks slid in a chair. Kenny went to go use it. Christian got the upper hand while they were distracting the referee. And he ends up hitting Christian. He ends up hitting Kenny Omega with the kill switch on a steel chair. Tosses the steel out. The referee turns around. Christian Cage pins Kenny Omega and wins the Impact World title. So that kind of helps set some stuff up there. And that was a great TV opening match that we've seen there. But again, it was very much clearly made to be a TV opening match. This is not a Kenny Omega versus Christian Cage on pay-per-view main title championship match that could potentially be the final match of the show. So you've got one of the best workers from his generation in Christian Cage against the current best big match wrestler in the industry today, the current reigning champion, Kenny Omega. And you have the main title, the champion, the All Elite World title on the line. And these two have both gone on record, especially Christian has gone on to say he's wanted to work Kenny Omega for a long time. I'm sure he loved getting the opportunity to get that little time with him in the ring on Rampage. But for all the marbles with the pay-per-view spotlight, potentially the main event of the biggest AEW pay-per-view of all time, these two want to have an instant classic, pun intended for Christian's old TNA name, World Championship match. And I think they are going to deliver. I think this has potential to be match of the night as well. Like, if it's not this match, it'll be the Steel Cage match and vice versa. Both are pretty much in contention to be the match of the night. Like, yeah, if it's not Omega versus Christian, it's the Young Bucks versus Lucha Brothers. If it's not Young Bucks versus Lucha Brothers, it's Omega versus Christian. I expect this match to be fantastic. I have been looking forward to this World Championship match ever since Christian Cage signed with AEW. I knew the moment he made that first appearance on Revolution after he signed that this match was going to be inevitable. At some point on pay-per-view, these two were going to clash. I'm sure that was in Christian Cage's negotiations. I'm sure when he was first talking to Tony Khan, he's like, I'm coming in, but like, if I'm coming in, one of my demands is to work a pay-per-view match with Kenny Omega. That's who I want to work with. And he's getting it here, and it's for the AEW World Championship. And I, as a big fan of both of these men, they're both my fellow countrymen. They're Canadians who both happen to be fantastic workers. A lot of people are wondering if they could top their Rampage match. Like I heard, Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez talking about that a day or so ago, wondering if it could be done, and I believe it could. Those men were working just a standard great opening television match with no pay-per-view. Like it was laid out to be a great TV opener. This would be laid out different. It's going to be laid out to be a main event or penultimate length World Championship match, probably 30 minutes plus, with a lot more drama. There's probably going to be no bullshit. I expect a clean finish here. And for that, I expect it to be Kenny Omega will get the clean finish with the One-Winged Angel at some point after he outlasts Christian Cage in the end. And he will pin him, and he will win and retain the AEW World Championship. And maybe he will gloat after the match, saying that there's absolutely nobody else who's even a threat to this title. And at that moment, especially if this main events the show, if it main events the show for sure, yeah, this is going to happen. You hear Bryan Danielson's music hit. Probably if I had to guess what his theme is going to be, you're going to hear the Final Countdown by Europe hit. And Kenny's going to act shocked. Everybody's going to go nuts because AEW just follows all of wrestling history, especially American independent wrestling history. And when Bryan Danielson was the king of Ring of Honor, he came out to the Final Countdown by Europe. That was his song. And everybody in that audience is going to sing along with it. No more will there be yes, 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 but there will be the Final Countdown. Bryan's going to come down. He's going to get in the ring. And him and Kenny are going to have a nice old face-off. And as I said, this is if this goes on last, this is 100% the reason it goes on last. Like, the match quality alone and the fact that it's for the main event championship of AEW is partly the reason. But if you're going to debut Bryan Danielson after the match is done, well, that's a fucking huge moment that could potentially, have people going crazy just as much as for anything CM Punk does with Darby Allin. But still, I'd say in the end, Kenny Omega easily retains I shouldn't say easily. After a hard-fought match, Kenny Omega will retain his AEW World Championship. He'll gloat and bask in his glory until he is interrupted by AEW's newest signee, Bryan Danielson, to end the pay-per-view. Or it could happen during the penultimate match and they still decide to have Punk and Darby main event the show. We will find out on Sunday. So yeah, there we go, everybody. There may be my predictions for AEW All Out. It takes place exactly as I end recording this, pretty much 48 hours from right now. It's just a little after 8 p.m. Eastern as I finish wrapping this up. And it's looking to be. It's got all the hype in the world. Like, it really does have all the hype going into this Sunday. And it's looking to be, like, the card is stacked. There's a lot of stuff to look forward to. A handful of great matches that if they deliver, we could be ending, we could be watching the pay-per-view of the year. We could end up seeing the best major show of 2021 when it's all said and done and All Out is officially in the books. I very much look forward to it, and we'll be doing a review probably within the day or two after it's done on Monday or Tuesday. I'd say will be when I do the review. Maybe as late as Wednesday. Just expect the review about halfway through this upcoming week, right before I go back to university, no less. So yes, if you enjoyed what you seen and heard, if you're watching on YouTube, give that subscribe button a nice little hit so you can follow more when I do these podcasts. Hopefully, I can do a little more of them, and even maybe branch out of predictions and reviews for big shows, and even talk about the speculation and where companies are going to go and all this sort of stuff, and maybe talk about it just a little bit more and give my 2 cents on these type of topics. But it's always nice to predict such a pay-per-view, and it's a pay-per-view that has a ton of hype. It's been built fantastically. Like, all eyes are on AEW, and they're shining pretty bright right now. So, but if you did like what you've seen and heard, and you're watching this on YouTube, give my channel a subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast form of it via Anchor, you can listen to us on all, or at least listen to me, on all of Anchor's affiliate platforms, which are Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Copy RSS. Again, most of our listens do come from Spotify. A lot of people have that as their preferred choice for listening to podcasts for all the music options that are on there. Again, you'll be one of many who listen to us on that platform as well. In fact, Anchor is now owned by Spotify. Anchor is a division of Spotify. Anchor is seemingly Spotify's like podcast distributor. Like, Anchor goes to Spotify, and Spotify owns that. So if you're listening on Anchor, you're listening on Spotify as well. So all of our listens really come from Spotify. So it'd be really good if you could just keep listening, and maybe give the Spotify or Anchor page a follow, and hear, because as I said, within 2 to 3 days after the pay-per-view, I'll be doing the review for All Out 2021. My co-host Gabe Nozid should be back by the time we predict Full Gear. He is returning from active military service in October, sometime I think by the middle of the month, if not the end of the month. Sometime by the end of October, he will be back, and me and him will be able to do podcasts together again, and hopefully more frequently from there on into the future as we go into 2022. Well, that's all I have to say as far as wrestling goes tonight before this big weekend, and that's all, folks. Do take care.